God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And what I said is that this was talking about this idea of this androgynous Adam and Eve two-headed hermaphrodite creature that and Jacob commented on this. Do that, but because what I said is that I was talking about how from a biological standpoint, you have man created in God's image, and that man is male and female. So to reconcile Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, rabbis came up with this androgynous creature idea. But what I said is that from a biological standpoint, males are, in a sense, both male and female because of the XY chromosomes as opposed to the XX chromosome. And so being female is, in a sense, recessive. And all men have both a masculine and feminine chromosome. The masculine masks the feminine, but it's still there. And of course, for everybody except the first man, this makes total sense because you receive these chromosomes from both your father and your mother. So Jacob had written, if the feminine in God is completely hidden, the way you explain the feminine in Jesus, then it would fail to be the image of God. An image is something we can see, like we see a man and his wife completing God's image, and in that manner creating the only way we can create. Primordial man, Adam, before he was split from Eve, was androgynous, visibly male and female. This completely allegorical explanation where the feminine is completely invisible fails to take the verse in Genesis seriously. Now, I don't think that's true but this was interesting because one of the main things that he brought up in this is that in the man being created male and female in the image of God, he's talking about the yod and the hay, and that the yod is the masculine and the hay is the feminine. And earlier on, and later also, get to this idea of Cain and Abel, and that Cain has the yod in his name and Abel has the hay in his. But Abel is male. He is a son, and yet in his name reflects female characteristics. And interestingly, just as I had said, X and Y, here you have yod and hay, two letters representing male and female aspects. And this connects kind of to this whole thing of these sort of why I don't like all of this tradition around Mary. Let's just see what was actually written down. I think we need to do the same thing with Genesis. It's very clear that the idea of the androgynous Adam, which was not accepted by all rabbis, but it was born out of a desire to mesh the two accounts of Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 to make them not conflict. I have my explanation I thought was very good. Interestingly enough, Jesus' Jewish name would be, Yeshua or Yehoshua, has both the yod and the hay, so that is a male with the masculine and feminine component in his name. And what I was talking about in my video is that from a biological standpoint, which I also did talk about with the doctor, it says the woman is taken from the rib. It's this thing of rib or side. If it's side, then you can have a person being split in half. the actual picture of this like two-faced creature. I don't get into like just saying it's ridiculous, but I mean, they couldn't know a thing, and so they crafted a story that could explain it. And this was, what I said. I found it was in the Genesis Rabbah, which, from what I could tell, was written like 300-400 A.D. So after Christianity. So definitely this could have been an exploration of thought with the intention of saying, well, we know we can't accept a male, singular being made in the image of God, male and female, because that would point to the Christian understanding, because that's Paul's understanding, and that's what is expressed in John 1, which came from Philo, who's a Jewish thinker out of Alexandria, as this thing that Christ is the creation of the world and of all humanity, and in his pre-existence. And so I think you just have to take a little grain of salt. Anything that comes from rabbinic interpretation post-Christianity, that there's always going to be that temptation to paper over any uncomfortable similarities with the way that the Christians are explaining things.
And we are going to, in fact, make God the king of everything. And so the only thing people might not like about this is we say that Israel, right, it can also be rewritten as Li Rosh, which means literally my head, right? And Israel is Reshit, is the firstborn of God's creation, is the head of that body, which is humanity.
The head of that body, which is humanity.
Do Jews consider their coming Messiah to be worshipped like God? Chas v'shalom, no way, no.
So the head of that body is something like Adam, except
no, it's Israel as opposed to the Gentiles.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So the rest of the nations make up the body of humanity,
of the earth.
And Israel is the head.
Okay. So Israel as a whole nation would be the firstborn.
Yes.
Instead of just Christ is how you would see it. Okay.
Yeah, it says Beni Bechori Israel, my firstborn son is Israel.
Okay.
Now, Jacob did say that it was in Corinthians when Paul writes about the body, that this is the oldest written version of this concept, and Paul, I guess he's getting it from somewhere, so it's the idea is pre-existing, but is the Christian view would be what is in Colossians 1 verses 15 through 18, talking about Jesus Christ, where it says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For him, by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy." So Christ and not Israel is the head. That's the difference.
All right, I'm trying to get context. I've never actually understood this or talked with Jewish people to actually understand what the coming of the Messiah would look like to them. So in that case, then how would you even recognize it when it did come? You would just see all of Like, how would this go come
If you
together?
have to ask, and this is where the disconnect is between Christians and Jews, right?
Yeah.
How do I know the Messiah has not come? Um, the Talmud gives an example. You put your hand in your pocket to get a nickel, and you get a dime. That's how you know the Messiah has not come.
Wait, can you break that down? Put your hand in your pocket to get a nickel and you get a dime. What?
Because the world has not yet been perfected.
Okay.
Right?
So
You don't have perfect knowledge. The world is not perfect. The Messiah has not come. So when a Christian says Jesus is the Messiah, if they really meant, like, because when you read the prophecies of the Messiah, like, it's very clear these things have not been completed, right? I mean, even Christians, there's a reason why Christians believe in the second coming.
Yeah.
Also, the Jews believed in the second coming, because if we look at the book of First Enoch, which may not be accepted by later rabbinic sources, it predates the time of Jesus, and it was at least one of various viewpoints of the possible understanding of the Messiah. In the book of Enoch, it's posited that the Messiah is Enoch returning, and that Enoch, who was taken up by God without experiencing physical death, would return as the Messiah. And of course, Enoch also connects the Son of Man language in Daniel that Jacob would say is not messianic, maybe, or at least not speaking about the divinity of the Messiah, with the character of Enoch. And of course, Jesus has a similarity in Enoch in that after his resurrection he ascended, so he is physically in a place, the same place where Enoch is, presumably, and can return to the earth at a later time as the Messiah that all will acknowledge. So to the Jews, they will say the Messiah has come, and the Christians will say the Messiah has come back, but it is the same person.
Well, the reason I asked that too is because, and I think I've thought this for a long time. It was kind of a concern to me, and I think I've heard Luke Thompson mention as well. I think he says something like that in Christ's second coming, like a lot of Christians are going to miss it, kind of the same thing. They'll miss what
He's a universalist, isn't he?
Yeah, but that being, I think the idea is that we think so materialistically. Like, if theosis actually happened, a lot of Christians are looking for.
Is universalism a license to be grumpy and mean towards other Christians? Because if you say that you're a universalist, nobody can criticize you, but because you're not condemning anyone to hell, but at the same time you can criticize all other Christians for saying things that you don't like and look down on them. Possibly.
For Christ to come, like, materialize, or like that the clouds split apart and this man float down or something, which I don't know that's a lot of Christians, but that probably, at least in my circles, that's probably what people would conceptualize it, rather than actually some sort of Christ consciousness manifesting in the earth and theosis actually happening. And
do you think for a second, like, theosis could happen to you and you wouldn't notice? like for a second, you believe this?
Like, how could theosis happen to you and you don't know it?
I'm not. Okay. Yeah, this gets into, like, I guess the whole other thing of how people conceptualize the rapture and the second coming and things like that. I don't think that. I mean, I think you would know when theosis happens to you, but I think personally you probably experience it in this life. Like, we talk about that, like, you get tastes of things, you get little glimpses of it and things like that. But I don't.
I mean, I
don't even know that most Christians. I don't even know that a lot of Christians believe. I shouldn't say a lot. I never heard about theosis until I got in this Discord server. I believed in it because I read the scriptures, but I never heard it taught in church at all. And what most circles I was in, the coming of Christ and the rapture is kind of just you disappear. It's just kind of like the Left Behind movies, to be honest, or something like that, which is not like theosis.
There's a literalism in Protestantism which is kind of silly. I'm sorry. Ben says, maybe I missed it, but why is your picture of God's name showing a man behind it? Because you don't think he has a form, right? Yes, but I do believe that we were made in the image of God, and one way we can see that we were made in the image of God is you see that God's name is reflected in the human body.
I guess what I meant to was to the fact that where people would miss something like, I don't know if theosis is the right word, is where they would miss seeing they'd miss seeing God in another person or something, where Christians would be looking, if it is something like God coming in the form of theosis, most Christians aren't looking for Jesus in their brother. They're looking for Jesus to come through the clouds. Does that make sense?
Well, that's because...
So I think that one problem with there's not really a problem with the idea of theosis per se, because I do believe that is what is reflected in the concept that we will all be raised, and that the resurrected body will be an incorruptible body, and as we get later on in this discussion, it's very important to realize there is a duality to man. It's not necessarily supposed to be, but it's in the fact that man is sinful. The flesh of man is what is corrupt. Now, that does not mean flesh is bad. It means that flesh needs to be redeemed. So, in that sense, when the physical body dies and is resurrected, then the desire and power the desire to sin and the power that sin has over us will be virtually or completely non-existent. But that does not mean that we cannot, through the power of God and the Holy Spirit, begin to transform here and now in this life. I would just say that the chasm between where we are and where we will be is far greater than what you could achieve through processes just in this earthly life. So I think that what's known as sanctification and theosis are similar. They're not identical, but I think in the Orthodox Church they talk about theosis as they talk about theosis in a way that really explains the process of sanctification, because you can have victories over sin. You can do an amazing God can do amazing things with you and transform a person's behavior and characteristics. But will you be the same as Jesus? Probably not within your earthly lifetime. And I think that there's also a potential that humanity can, from generation to generation, become more and less sinful in a sense, but the chasm between the perfection of God and in the sense of Jesus was sinless. In one sense, you could say he was sinless because he never violated the command to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Because if you did that fully to your utmost, with no reservations, nothing you did would be sin. And that is a mark that we always will fall short of. So I do think that Jason is right, that we should be looking to see Christ in others, and hopefully, as Christians, this is, I believe our best method of evangelism is that we would hope that people see Christ in us, in our lives, and that would resonate with the spiritual aspect of ourselves that is not corrupted. The breath of God that was given to man was not corrupted. The dust of the earth that we are formed out of, the flesh, is corrupted. It's not bad. It needs to be redeemed. It needs to die and rise again in a more perfect form.
Most Christians believe like Jesus is like born of a virgin and this superhuman thing that we have no connection to.
Come on.
What?
He is, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, see, like I even
Like
It's
if
a superhero.
if Jesus is born of a virgin, right? Then he is not something you can embody in any way, right? So when Jesus says, "I pray that you have a relationship with God like I do," like, so is he praying that you be born of a virgin?
so like do you
So here's a thing that Jacob likes to bring up a lot, even though I have dealt with this in some detail. The computer's being really slow. But this thing of, Jesus was born of a virgin and we're not born of virgins, so we can't be like Jesus. First of all, I did a very thorough analysis of where did this idea of the virgin birth as a sign come from. And I believe that it's found within the context of Genesis 1 through 11, specifically Genesis 1, 2, or 3 or through 9. And that is relevant because it is therefore part of the mythology in some form or fragment that was passed to all nations prior to the Tower of Babel, and is not specifically special to Judaism, but it is part of God's creation, that this would be the sign, and that the seed of the woman that God speaks to about crushing the head of the serpent, within those few chapters you can deduce that it's speaking about a virgin birth. Now, we'll keep going and I'll touch more on the specific points as they come up.
feel the same way about Adam? I haven't been made of clay, so I can't take part in Adam's sin. This seems a little silly.
Yes, it is silly.
Still seems silly to me.
If the virgin birth of Jesus is important to who he is,
I mean, I do think it's important to who he is, but I think it's important in a different way, and that it's about repentance, and it's probably a little bit about humiliation, right? Like, to be frank with you, right?
how is that?
Well, it's a subtle miracle, as you pointed out, right?
Oh, so you think... Okay, so I personally think that the whole virgin birth thing has to do with... I actually think he was known to be a bastard, and that's why Christians had to clean it up with the virgin birth.
Now, this is a dangerous road to go down, this thing of Christians cleaning things up, because you have to have some sort of evidence that of a contrary source to point to that conclusion. Otherwise, it's just speculation, and it's actually not very good speculation.
And yeah, if Jesus was born a bastard, right? That would actually make more sense in my conception, because he would be of lowly birth. But Christians couldn't accept a Jesus who was actually of lowly birth, so they turned him into the son of a virgin.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of the thing, right? So he's this, right? He's this high person, and he's brought low by a lot of things, including people thinking his parentage is wrong or whatever. And same thing with.
But why shouldn't his parentage be lowly? What's wrong with a bastard?
Is there anything wrong with it?
There's not necessarily anything wrong with a bastard, and I think that people may have thought Jesus was a bastard, but a bastard is conceived in sin, and sin is something that is hereditary, and it's passed on through the physical body, and specifically from the Father, which is part of why the virgin birth is important.
I don't think so. I don't think a bastard can not be a great. And this is actually one of the teachings of the Mishnah. It says, "Manzer Talmid Chacham, a wise, a scholar who is a bastard, mamzer, right, deserves more respect than the chief priest if he is an ignoramus." And this is a Pharisaic teaching against the Sadducees, who like thought, no, bastards are worthless.
So to me, right? What is this?
The virgin birth was because God is the real father, and it also doesn't pass down the sin nature and curse from Adam. I mean, this is basically the Catholic belief.
This is not really the Catholic. Well, this is correct. I would say that this is the reason why there was a virgin birth, and this does not mean that Jesus is fundamentally different from all of humanity, because he is human and he got his humanity from Mary. Now, the problem with the Catholic teaching is that they changed. They could not understand how Mary could, being a sinful person, produce a sinless son, because she is passing on her, her genes and her physical heredity, and so because of that, they fix the problem by adding a story about Mary being conceived sinless in the Immaculate Conception. And then they also, and this is where I think things gets really messed up, is that they decided that perpetual virginity was a holier state than simply Jesus being conceived while Mary was a virgin through supernatural means, and then Mary having an actual marriage with Joseph, which I believe is correct. And in the Jewish context in which they're born, I don't think Jacob would disagree with this, that would be the holy thing to do, for Mary and Joseph to have an actual marriage. And I don't believe you could say that they even were married if there was not ultimately some consummation, because the Catholic Church would probably disagree, because they consider marriage to be about the official sanctification, sanction of the Catholic Church. The document is what makes you married. But God created marriage in Genesis, when Adam and Eve became one flesh, and that is the marriage ceremony, is the act of consummation. So, of course, Mary is described as being betrothed to Joseph, but I think that later on, it refers to Joseph and Mary as husband and wife, such as when they go into Egypt. So that would imply that the marriage was consummated after the birth of Jesus. And that this is a stain upon Mary is absolutely wrong, and I think that this teaching does great damage to women, and to families in general, and that there has been a lot of harm with the idea that virginity is a higher, holier status than marriage. The wonderful thing about virginity is that it can be a temporary holy position, because if you remain a virgin until you are married, you have experienced the holiness of virginity, but it's not supposed to be a permanent state. Not to say that it can't, for some people in some circumstances it is, it's great, but it's not better than being married. I would say the fact that you can be a virgin and be a married person once you're married means that you are able to have two distinct experiences of being a holy person serving God in different ways.
Is that so? What I was thinking, this is where my mind was going, is like that it's not even so much about. I almost thought the virgin birth was more about theosis than it was about Christ. As an emphasis on that you could say the church or you could say Israel has to be, in the way Jonathan Peugeot talks about it, it has to be virgin to God, like as in dedication.
Yeah, I think Peugeot's wrong about everything with Mary because he loves the idea of her never fulfilling the role for which God created women, which was to be fruitful and multiply. And having one son only is not multiplication. And there was no concept of that being to say you're going to have God's going to give you one son only. That son is going to die as a relatively young man, and then, although he's resurrected, leave this earth and leave this woman with nothing. From the perspective of the culture she lived in, that would not be a blessing. A blessing would be that she had many children, and that, it does speak of Jesus's brothers and sisters, and that seems very likely that was the case. And I think we get into the other things of, is the Messiah being raised as an only child? If you just watch Jordan Peterson's last video, you would see that from a psychological standpoint, that does not seem like that seems like a good scenario maybe to create an antichrist, but maybe not the real Christ-like character. Now, of course, I also did a video and spoke a lot with Dr. Mancha, the expert in epigenetics. And the interesting thing is that, when you think about the act of eating the fruit, which is in Romans 5:12, how sin entered through one man, humans were affected in two ways. One was that they received the knowledge of good and evil from eating that fruit, and secondly, they received the consequences of embracing sinful disobedience to God, which is that is the sin nature. And so specifically I would say that is passed down through the man, because an epigenetic phenomenon affects the person to whom it happens, and it is passed on through the male. It does defy the Wiseman barrier of passing on traits, but that's been, it's proven that that's true. A man can pass on experience to his children beyond just his own genetics. They've done lots of experiments with this. It's a fact. It's just it makes much more sense. It's rejected because a Lamarckian view of evolution would require a creator and a designer, as opposed to Darwinian evolution, which has randomness and chaos as the ultimate cause of everything. But nevertheless, the thing that is not affected by epigenetic phenomenon is the eggs of the woman. They are literally like sequestered away in a place where they are untouched from the time they develop within the womb. When the baby is developing in the womb, the woman's eggs are formed, and they are impervious to genetic modification through means, experience, trauma, things like that. And so what Mary could have been a vector for is to bring uncorrupted DNA from the female line through Eve to the time of Jesus' conception, but passing on the knowledge of good and evil. So Jesus would have the knowledge of good and evil without having the inbuilt desire to disobey God, to give into sinful desire. Basically, the struggle that Paul talks about in Romans 7. Now, it's not to say that Jesus wasn't tempted in any way. He may have. I do believe the temptation was there and was real for him, but he didn't have the warpedness that was produced, that we inherit from our sinful fathers. But he did have the knowledge of good and evil. And this is an important point, because the experience in Romans 7 is that we know the right thing that we should do, and yet for some reason we don't do the right thing, we do the wrong thing. I think, if you listen to Chad or other people that have struggled with things like alcoholism or other substance abuse, they understand that we are completely powerless against sin as it resides in our physical body. And so that is why the virgin birth is necessary for Jesus to be the man who can live the sinless life that we are all incapable of doing.
Like, the way he uses it is not in a physical way. It's like what virginity represents, is that you're separated to one identity. You're separated to one telos, or however you'd say it. So, I think it was a virgin birth physically, like in reality, because it doesn't seem that strange to me if I believe in all the other miracles. But
well, how would you even know?
There's no way to prove it. Yeah, there's no way to prove it.
So Muslims in the Quran, I just found this out recently. So in the Quran, the way you know that Mary was a virgin was when Jesus was born. He immediately announced that his mother was a virgin.
Oh, that's fun. I like that one.
And that was the proof.
So this is a fantastic example, I think, of why this stuff gets so messy. God reveals a thing, and we have doubt. And because we have doubt, we decide that we're going to add our own explanation to make sense of it, which is... That's the problem with the Catholic doctrines of the Immaculate Conception and the perpetual virginity of Mary, is that they thought it would bolster her claim, and I guess by extension the claim of Jesus and his messiahship. But the gospel does not try to make this thing of how would they know, because what it says is that Mary is told, and Joseph is told, and she kept these things in her heart. And Mary is believed to be an eyewitness to the gospel writers of Matthew and Luke, or at least one of those sources, and some other connected people, the other. So it wasn't a thing everybody knew. No, and that is the whole point of why God chose a woman who was betrothed to be married, because if a woman just became pregnant and said, I'm a virgin, she has no legal claim to, defend herself in that, because there is no witness. So everybody would assume she was lying. Everybody would assume she was carrying a bastard. And, she would probably suffer the consequences of being a promiscuous woman. Whereas, if the reason for the virgin birth is because it was necessary to bring Jesus into the world, it doesn't need to be this thing that everybody knows. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if people believed it, because you could read some of the passages, and I did a video somewhere, it's called why Mary I don't believe Mary's a virgin, which is a clickbait title, because I was just saying I don't think she remained a virgin forever. But It does seem like maybe some of the people questioned Jesus's parentage, but it was within the context of, well, she's a married woman, this is her husband, this is, so we can't say anything. Now, I thought maybe perhaps that points to that Jesus could have had a slightly different physical appearance from his siblings, because he did not have the same biological father, but having the same biological mother, there would be enough similarity to, you couldn't go too far out on it. It wouldn't be too obvious of a thing. That's somewhat speculative, but I think that there is good logic behind it. But this Muslim idea that Jesus said, I was born of a virgin as a brand new baby, it's like a cartoon example of why the Catholic thing is problematic, and also why Jewish reinterpretations of passages post-Christianity are a little bit suspect in some ways.
Yeah, there are versions of the story where when he's born, there's like an emanation of light, like when Paul sees the Christophany or whatever. To me, it's the dichotomy there of like, oh, he's born a virgin, oh, he's a bastard. This is the same thing happens when he dies, right? Oh, he's king of the Jews, ha 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 ha, right? Is the thing. And so this is the dichotomy, and it's there when he's born too. And I don't think it's an accident. I think it's intentional that both are happening simultaneously.
Yes, I think it is intentional as well. The virgin birth was necessary for the character and personhood of who Jesus is, but for that knowledge to be hidden was necessary for God's ultimate plan, because Jesus did not ultimately come to say the things that he said, but to do the things that he did, which the most important of was the crucifixion and the resurrection. And I think that from the perspective of the tempter, Satan did not know concretely that Jesus was the Messiah until the resurrection, at which point it was too late. And if he had realized what God's plan was, he never would have allowed Jesus to be crucified. He would have protected him from suffering, and would have instead given him many opportunities to sin, and tempted him and continued to tempt him. So yeah, that hiddenness of it, it was important that it happened, and also that it was not known to everyone.
That he is, in fact, that he is viewed to be a bastard when he's actually the child of a virgin.
Right.
Okay, what do you do with the Annunciation and the star and the Magi and all of that stuff?
Okay,
What do you mean by that?
Okay, well, he has a lot of.
Well, let's think about that, because what was the consequence of that? The consequence was that all the children were killed in Bethlehem. So that's what you do with it. That's what was done with it. Now, because of that, and because Jesus and Mary and Joseph fled to Egypt, that gives them obscurity and anonymity, and it gives Jesus the ability, I would say, to be raised without constant attack from evil supernatural forces, because there was a lot of demonic activity in that time. Satan was present in that land at that time, and this is because this was a time that people were expecting Messiah based on prophecies in the Hebrew Scriptures. So that's what happened. So the signs are there, and then Jesus slips through the cracks, and all these other children, unfortunately, are killed. I don't think any of those children post the experience of having died to protect the Messiah have any regrets, because they are reunited with him in heaven and celebrating Jesus. They're kind of unsung heroes in a way. But that's what you do with that. And of course, the Annunciation, or Gabriel's Annunciation to Mary, and was hidden in her heart. She didn't tell other people. She didn't tell Elizabeth, but the Holy Spirit spilled the beans there. Joseph had it in a dream, and he kept it to himself, kept it quiet. They did not spread this around. This is something that only after the crucifixion and resurrection did this information come forth, as people like Matthew and Luke are trying to uncover the details.
According to the story, right, there's a lot of pageantry when he's born. Is there less pageantry when you're born, and what does this have to do with you and Jesus? Right?
Say that again. There's a lot of what when he's
pageantry.
Born? Pageantry. Right. So like a star comes and an angel announces it to everyone. So like how do you get the bastard? Like the Christian story is everybody knew he was born of a virgin.
Yeah, everybody knew he was born of a virgin after he died and rose from the dead. Nobody knew while he was alive, while he was walking around.
Nobody anywhere in the entire Christian corpus calls him the child of a bastard, right?
Okay, that's a little silly.
Well, so you have to reject. There's no way of not rejecting the Gospels. I'm sorry, it's just not possible.
Yeah, well, except if you just read them and actually pay attention to them and see if they're internally consistent. I would say Lydia McGrew's YouTube channel, she does an amazing job of her undesigned coincidence information. She puts forth a lot of really good stuff on the reliability of the Gospels, and she had one about the virgin birth on Unbelievable that was also really good.
Possible.
I mean, I do have my own thing about like. So when Jesus is born, right? This is around 0 AD, which is the beginning of the age of Aquarius, and he sort of brings in the new age, but like, and there's even a sort of similar thing at the Last Supper where it's like they're looking for a guy carrying around a pot of water, right? Which is Aquarius, but to me, like that's what it means. As far as like people who knew, like yeah, there are people looking at the stars expecting something to happen, but yeah, like. To me, like even when the angel shows up, he doesn't show up to everybody. It shows up to like Mary and maybe Joseph, right? And that's it.
So the star is like astrology, and the Magi had studied it, sort of thing, or something.
Yeah.
So, but going back to the virgin thing, I was like the symbol you have here and your logo and everything.
Mm.
That's kind of how I see it. And when you had up the last hay and the other,
this one?
I can't remember.
Or this one?
That one. Yeah. So you have like where everything, all creation is virgin to God, and so then it gives birth to the lordship underneath it. Like everything in creation is. Does that make sense? Like
I understand what you're saying. I just I view the like. I understand what you're saying, but I view it as like no, it has to be standing up. Right, so you have the masculine, and it isn't a virgin thing. It's a bringing the masculine into the feminine thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where it would be virgin is where there's only one masculine is what I guess I'm saying. There's only one God that's it's not you don't have a whole pantheon in your you're with Baal over here and with Zeus over here.
It's not about a pantheon. It's about like the masculine. I'm trying to like the idea is that like in Song of Solomon, right? That God is the groom and humanity is the bride. but like, then why the virgin thing? It's like, no, then you have a bride and groom and a consummation.
Yes, there's a consummation. There's also, that is part of the thing of Jesus returning, is to collect his bride. The consummation happens at the end of things. So, just like with Adam and Eve, the man is there first, and then it's not good for him to be alone, but he has to wait before he gets the woman. And so that is the world, and the church, and all of us are, in a sense, the woman waiting and becoming ready for the man, for Christ.
So you're no longer saying that it is a you're no longer saying that the virginity is important. You're actually saying that there's a possibility of other gods somehow defiling the virgin, which makes no sense in a monotheistic context.
But what about Baal?
What about Baal? He doesn't exist.
Well, when God calls Israel a harlot.
Right,
stuff.
because because idolatry is wrong and all that stuff. Yeah.
So
yeah.
idolatry would be not being virgin, because you're giving yourself, like,
Right.
I mean, Christians would do the same thing. Yeah. So to where that, so I mean, I believe in the actual, like, it sounds like I don't, because I'm talking in this weird language, but I believe in the actual physical. But I think the importance of it was to represent that that's theosis. Mary is kind of a symbol of the feminine, right? And then she's a virgin feminine, in that she's completely set apart, not in any idolatry.
I mean,
it makes it too weird.
So,
like,
it's too loosey goosey, I guess.
And like, what's Joseph doing there? Like, it.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
Joseph's there so that Mary doesn't get killed for being a single mother, that you weren't supposed to be a single mother.
So Ben apparently agrees with Roman about the age of Aquarius, I guess. The signs in heaven were arranged to align at that time.
There's a really great podcast where Michael, Naked Bible podcast, I think it's about, like, I don't know, it was a Christmas one. It's about the birth of Jesus, but it's about all the astrological symbols in the Bible, pointing to Revelation 13 as describing the vision of the woman and the beast and all these things is actually talking about constellations in the zodiac, and that it gives a date which you can go see. It's September 11th, 4 BC. I believe it's 4 BC. That is the date of Jesus's birth, which lines up with that thing, which is also Tishri 1, which is supposed to be the day the earth was created, and also Noah's birthday. So it's a really great podcast explaining that. To me, it makes perfect sense, and it's very clear that it's the sort of thing that would have been a sign to people who were knowledgeable about astrology, which was most cultures at that time.
When Adam named the animals, did he care about word roots, or did he use some other system or pattern? Well, the general Jewish belief is that the names were reflections of the spiritual powers which God had imbued in them. He was recognizing the spiritual makeup of those animals.
So, if I was going to try to plug Mary into theosis, it would look really weird. It would look like there is an idea in, like, Taoism of, like, these of, like, you're sort of, when you're sort of trying to, they call it immortality, but it's theosis, it's like the same sort of idea, that you sort of form, like, a spirit embryo, which becomes a sort of spirit fetus. And this is sort of the sort of thing how I would plug it in, but it'd be tricky to get that like with just Christianity.
I think that it's very difficult to fit Mary into your practice of Christian spirituality without adding a lot of extra biblical sources that were mostly written much later.
Yeah. All that being said, too, I want to throw out there, I was brought up Protestant, so I'm not Orthodox. So I'm not speaking on behalf of Orthodoxy or Catholicism or anything like that. So this is my understanding of theosis.
No, this is we are you being a theologian, official theologian for the Catholic Church.
All right.
You are the representative of the Pope in this Bible study.
All right,
and all Catholics are bound by what you say.
All right.
So the letter meanings describe the animal spirits. Yeah, I would say that. I would say so. Yeah.
Is there like some complicated Mishnah with all this stuff in it? With like, oh yeah, this is the word for fish, it's dag, and this must mean something about the letters.
I am sure there are teachings, especially in the Midrash, about stuff like that. People think I'm being somehow humble when I say like, I'm only qualified to teach elementary school in a Jewish context, and I really mean that. I am only qualified to teach elementary school, and like, yeah, people misunderstand my qualifications.
Is this some false humility thing?
No. Do I sound like the type of person to like, you know?
I'm just giving you a hard time. Because I have to speak on behalf of the Pope, but you can't. Yeah. I did have a question. This might go back to something else, though. But this was what popped in my head that I was extremely interested by. It kind of goes back to the beginning stuff you're talking about, and you mentioned Ecclesiastes, and the same. This was the Cain and Abel thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you said so. The word vanity, you said, is
Hevel. Yeah.
Havel. Like, and that's basically like it. Like
it is Abel's name.
Yeah.
It
okay.
is Abel's name. Yeah. So then is this what is it? Ecclesiastes
1-2. I'm just looking at chapter 1 here, but then I was looking at because you were talking about the shapes of the letters too, and the head being feminine, and then I looked at Yode. Sorry, that was it. And then so I went down and I was looking at verse 3, and the word where it says under the sun, and under it looks like they're all that shape as the hay, and then sun. I didn't know if there was a play on that with Cain. Or
so those letters are somewhat similar to hay, but they are definitely different letters. Although hay sometimes does turn into tough in certain contexts, but yeah, I wouldn't. Make
okay.
Yeah.
Because I didn't. So but then sun there is Shemesh, right? Or
Shemesh here. Yeah, Shemesh. Yeah.
So that is gosh, I'm not sure what I'm even thinking here. I didn't know if that had a similarity to like to Cain in any way.
I think that it would be interesting if you're going to try to look at the meaning and the shape of letters, to probably go and look at the Samaritan Pentateuch, because their form of Paleo-Hebrew is generally accepted to be what was used prior to this Babylonian script, and so it was less uniform, but it was more symbolic. And there are scholars who believe there's probably some sort of a hieroglyphic Hebrew that probably preceded that. But as far as the symbolic meaning and the shapes of letters, that would be an interesting thing to look at.
I guess just because I was thinking, I'm not sure what I'm thinking. Because the word Shem is in there, right? Shemesh, so like the name.
Right, as like name.
Yeah, so everything is under the name or something. I didn't know if it was kind of like everything is under the masculine, because you were saying Cain is So
my idea about Cain and Abel was, so you know how Cain, what happens is Cain kills Abel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first question is why did God let Cain successfully kill Abel?
I mean, you can't punish him if he didn't. Like, he hadn't done a
Well,
crime, right?
yeah, but when he tried, why was he able to do it? Like, why didn't God make Abel stronger than Cain? Or even like, let's say he beat him. Like, why didn't God stop him or at least heal Cain, right? Or first of all, why was Cain able to kill Abel? Like, why did God allow that to happen?
Calvinism. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Second
I don't know.
question.
Tell me. Yeah, okay.
Second question. So, what was God asking when God's like, "Where's your brother Abel?" God didn't know where Abel was. God didn't know what happened. Like, why is God asking this question? Third question. Okay, God knows what's happening. He tells Abel, "No, you're lying." I mean, he tells Cain, "No, you're lying. Your brother's blood is screaming out to me." So, what's the correct thing to happen there? God should resurrect Abel and kill Cain. So why doesn't he do that?
So, I believe what you think is that he will eventually.
Yes.
And I think that the whole through line of this, especially if you add a few details that you missed, is that he warns Cain before he kills Abel, and he gives Cain the mark after he kills Abel. Is that the through line of this is actually that he's not trying to protect Abel at all. He's trying to protect Cain, which to me shows that Cain is the one who needs the protection.
True, but what's the point? Like, what's going on? Like, so Abel was the one who gave the sacrifices which God was pleased by. Cain didn't. Right?
Well, to me, like when you put it this way, what it starts to look like is that Abel is already perfect, right? Air quotes, I know. And Cain isn't. Cain needs to be redeemed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually the whole point of God giving the sign to Cain is like, hey, nobody kill Cain. Why? Because it's actually really important for Cain to live in this world that we have, and repent in order to perfect himself. Because that's what God really, really wants. The story of creation, of Genesis, is God puts us in this world, and he wants us to do good, and he tells us to do good. And we don't. Well, some of us do. And those people can leave this world. Why? Because they will be resurrected when the perfection does come. And Abel will receive all of his rewards, including his reward for having suffered, right? For his blood being spilled on the ground. So Abel is actually going to be exalted by being victimized in this way, beyond Cain, who didn't do what he was supposed to do. But Cain has the opportunity to repent, and because he will repent, then in the resurrection, what you will have is Hevel and Cain, right? And Abel will be perfect because he lived a righteous life and receive his reward for that, and Cain will receive his reward for having repented of his sin.
So let me see this. So a sinless man who did nothing wrong died, and because of that, he will be glorified and exalted because the punishment that he received was not fair, because he did not deserve it, because he didn't do anything wrong, but because he paid that price of suffering, the person who did do wrong will also be saved if they repent and understand that it was through the noble sacrifice of that other person that they were redeemed. Yeah, that makes sense.
Those are the two options. You can do things correctly and, in fact, suffer for them in this world, or you can do things wrong and appear to be receiving things you do not deserve in order for you to be able to repent. And then when the veil is lifted, when there is the resurrection, when the day of judgment comes, God makes it all right, which is that Abel will receive his reward beyond that of Cain, obviously, and Cain will receive his reward, which will be less than that of Abel, but Abel was what's the what it says in, I know the Hebrew, like
Penal substitutionary atonement.
he was healed. Cain was healed by Abel's stripes. Abel suffered for the sin of Cain.
Okay. By his stripes you were healed. This is by his, right?
Yeah.
So when you were talking about all that stuff, when you're talking about all that stuff, the thing that occurred to me was that Cain gives a false sacrifice in the first place. He sacrifices the wheat, and God doesn't like it for whatever reason. And then interpreted a certain way, you could say that he gives another false sacrifice when he kills Abel, because there is another through line in the Bible about human sacrifice and how it's a bad idea. And I wonder if that's the idea behind this, is that he tries to give a human sacrifice, the wrong human sacrifice. Right? I do think there is a correct human sacrifice, which is not to literally nail yourself to a cross, but to sacrifice yourself to live this sort of cruciform life for other people. And because of that, I don't even know. Like he has to be afraid of people, I guess, and he has to receive the mark to sort of not be killed by them. But I don't know.
Jason, what are you thinking?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I liked everything you said, Jacob. That seems right to me. And God putting a mark on him, I've heard it was just so that no one would kill him, so he'd kind of stop the pattern of vengeance or something like that. Kind of as a like.
Well, vengeance belongs to God, and that is actually part of what is important for us to know. Is if we go around trying to make things right ourselves, we are going to mess it up because we're human beings. And ultimately, we have to have that faith in the resurrection and in God, that day of judgment coming, and God making things right.
Yeah. It's interesting too. The what does he say to Cain afterwards? The ground shall no longer yield its fruit to you, or something like that. So it's.
That's Genesis 4 we're in, or 3? Where are we? Genesis 4.
Yeah. So like living in that way of, if you're living in that in the pattern of Cain, the pattern he just established, there's no way that your life will be fruitful. There's no way your future will be fruitful. So you need repentance.
Yeah, but also like just in a more literal way. Like he could stay still, and if he stays still and doing the same things he was doing, he'd be doomed. So God sort of forces him to move and change his life.
I think it might be something to the idea that perhaps Cain. I do think that the motivation in the heart of Cain and Abel is by far the most important aspect of the difference in the acceptance of their offerings, more so than the substance of them or anything like that. But perhaps in God's dissatisfaction with Cain, looking at the curse that God gives him, removing his ability to bring forth fruit from the earth, he told Adam that because of Adam's sin, the earth would bring forth thorns and thistles, and that he would, suffer great toil to make his grain. And I think that perhaps Cain, which is, I don't like the way Pajot. I think Pajot's totally wrong about what he says about Cain being like the line of technology, but it is maybe in a sense. He had, in the second generation, gained some more knowledge of agriculture, so that it was not so much of a burden as it was for Adam. Adam had to do the hard work of figuring it all out. Like, it's not just about, digging tilling the fields that makes it difficult. But if you invest your time in a garden, in a vineyard, in your fields, you over time reduce the amount of work necessary, and and so that perhaps Cain gave something that did not cost him. For Abel to sacrifice from his flocks means that he has to take on the role of killing an animal, which is not a thing done lightly. I think that is a costly act, and you have a relationship with an animal. You don't have a relationship with plants the same way. But perhaps if Cain had mastered some of the skills of agriculture, it wasn't costly in the same way. He knew those plants were coming back. Once you plant the trees and things like that, and after the first few years, the perennial crops just produce on their own. So that may have been some of the imbalance in it, is that it really didn't represent as much cost for Cain, and because of his giftedness, perhaps, and that is the thing that God takes away from Cain, and therefore Cain has to then learn a difficult way of life so that he can understand the cost of his actions in a way that Adam had to, by being exiled from the garden after his sin, and that is what led to the place of repentance where Abel is seeking God. So that's just a little side thought on that one.
I know some people think that like the mark of Cain might have been like ironically enough like sheep, so he could be a shepherd like Abel was, so he would have like a way to make a living. But I don't know really what it was.
Yeah.
Well, I have heard the idea that that it won't. So it says, "Ki ta'bod et ha'adama lo tosef tet kocha lach." It will no longer give you its strength. Na vaned tihye ba'aretz. You shall this way and that. Strength. Na vaned tihye ba'aretz. You shall this way and that.
Yield the strength to you.
So I have heard the thing that like he brought his sacrifice from things from the earth, and he would no longer be able to because this is what he had done with it. But
Okay.
it's actually very interesting to me that kocha there has a dagesh in the hay, has a aspirated hay, which is
What does that mean?
It's a rare thing that happens when there's a doubling of the hay, because so koach means strength, kocha means her strength, because land is feminine, adama is feminine, right? So and so kocha without the dagesh in the hay could just be feminine of strength, but kocha with the aspirated hay tells you that it's her strength as opposed to feminine strength, which
That is interesting.
I think you have to learn Hebrew now, Jason.
Yeah, it's very intriguing. It's always been intriguing to me for years. I just and then you get little things like that, and I'm like, I don't even know what to do with that yet. It's just one of those things like, man, I'm gonna have to chew on that for a while. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you have any immediate thoughts? Or
yeah, I do. I mean, it's also interesting to me. So there are places when so lecha is how you address people, you address men, and lach is how you address women. And there are places that because of the cancellations, lecha turns into lach, and so in you would never translate the simple meaning to like be addressing, but God is actually addressing Cain in the feminine kind of there, because you'll see it says second person feminine singular to you, so he's calling him you in the feminine, but that's only because of the cancellations. And it's interesting where those stuff like that happens. These are the types of things, like there's a reason why we don't, like in Judaism the first thing you learn is Hebrew, because it's like you just have to learn the Hebrew if you're going to have a Jewish understanding of the Bible. And well, that's part of it. The other part is back before Christianity, we did also like, we were okay with translations of the Bible, and we saw what Christians did with it. And in reaction, Judaism was like, no more translations, everybody learns Hebrew.
So this was a choice that was made only by the Jewish people that already decided that they were not interested in Christ. And this is now, I mean, they're not trying to evangelize anybody, so that's fine. That's just what they want to do. It is the same point that the Muslims make about the Quran, that it cannot be translated because, well, I've spoken a lot about this on my channel, but you know, if God translates if God reveals information to man through meaning, and especially, you know, like as a prophecy, as a vision, and they're writing things down and they're explaining it, we can never, even two native speakers of the same language can never perfectly communicate what is inside my head. I can never perfectly communicate what is inside my head and get you to understand it the same way. So that's just a problem, you know, with communication in general. But if the meaning that God speaks through his word is so fragile that it can only be understood by learning a specific language, that's very suspicious. And, you know, it's very interesting that prior to the advent of Christianity, there was no problem with the translation. There's lots of translation into Greek, Aramaic, and other languages. And, you know, I would say, you know, part of this disconnect is, I don't know to what extent the Alexandrian Jewish community was welcomed back into the fold after the fall of Jerusalem, because, you know, that's when it became a Hebrew-only thing after that point, that they're not using translations anymore. So, yeah, it's, to me, the ability to translate speaks of the strength of the meaning that God put forth, and I think because of the events of the Tower of Babel, you know, if God's the one that's in control of changing man's language, then he's okay with people trying to translate meaning from one language to another. And I think a big part of that is that it does slow people down. It slows people down because it causes both sides to consider what they mean more carefully. And if the person you are speaking to understands something in a different way than what you were originally trying to convey, you could, and very often, you know, just in normal conversation, this to say, well, I never thought about that before. And I think that happens even in this conversation with people speaking in English, that we learn from another person's thinking about something. But if you're specifically trying to keep certain understandings from arising, limiting the language is a very good way to do it. And interestingly enough, I found out recently that the Quran, it attributes many of the miracles in the Old Testament to Allah, in the saying that when they say that Allah is the same God as the God of Abraham. But one that they exclude is the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel story is not in the Quran, and it's not attributed to Allah, because that would severely hinder their claim of the supremacy of Arabic as the, you know, divine language of communication. So, and if that's, you know, if that's how Jewish people want to set up their scholarship, they can, but that story is still in there. And I think, you know, if you're willing to accept the New Testament accounts, then the story of Pentecost is very much an endorsement of the idea of translation, because that was all the Jewish people in Jerusalem, hearing the message in their own language, and then accepting that message in their own language and bringing it back to their home countries in their own languages. And so, that's when this business of translating began. And in the Christian world, it never really, well, I shouldn't say it never really stopped, because Greek was the language in the East, and then in the West it was translated into Latin. But of course, at a certain point, Latin was not the commonly used language anymore. It became the sacred sacramental language in the Western Church, and that caused big problems, because then it was that people are always reliant upon the priests who spoke Latin and understood it and could read it to understand what the Bible had to say. And you have stories about like Wycliffe, who was burned to death for translating the Bible into English. And and it was not, and there's nothing within the Bible that says that it's so sacred. You could say, oh, it won't be quite the same, which is the point that Jacob's making, I think. And I have no problem saying that there is levels of meaning that we cannot understand within a translation. But, and so I'm fine with his position on that. When you go to more extreme to like the Islamic position, it's saying like, well, the Quran in Arabic is divinely inspired. In translation, it's no longer the Quran. If you believe that the basic message you're trying to convey is not translatable from one language to another, that's very suspicious to me. And I think that's a very typical scenario that leads to corruption when you're controlling the information flow in that way.
That's probably fair. We got good things like the Message and all those, right? Those crazy translation.
So your idea is that Cain is the masculine, right?
Cain, I mean, that's what so Cain, the name, right? She says Kaniti ish, right? I purchased, so Eve says, I have acquired a man with God, right? Or actually, you could even translate it onto God, right? And so the way I would understand all of this is that Cain, in his killing Abel, actually is moving into the feminine, and that's why there's all the and like he kills Hevel, which I would say is feminine, and has to return to the masculine. So I haven't worked it out, but there's definitely a masculine and feminine interplay there in my hermeneutic and cosmology.
So
this part is really interesting because this actually goes along super well with the big paper that I wrote on Genesis 1 through 11, essentially, where I believe that the point of the genealogy of Cain being included is that is the line from which the wives of the sons of Noah come. And so, because in the idea that, like, why does it matter? Well, Cain had these descendants because they all got wiped away in the flood anyway. And that's what people think. In the typical Sethite interpretation of Genesis 6, that there was the good people and the bad people, and they turn it into this racial thing. All the bad people get wiped away, apparently. Or people try to say some weird thing about, like, well, maybe a son of some relative of Cain snuck on the ark. I think it's very clearly shown, and I did a lot of research, that the wives of Noah and his sons came from Cain. And so that is an interesting way that Cain turns from the masculine to the feminine, and that it's not the name of Cain, the lineage of Cain through his masculine name, but through his female descendants that God preserves. So in a sense, it's this thing of, Cain I don't know, I guess you'd say, like, with this thing of Cain being the masculine and Abel being the feminine, but Abel is male with a female characteristic properly integrated into who he is, was holy and righteous, and Cain is like toxic masculinity or something. You know, I'm sure some feminists would probably love that idea, but I think it kind of is true in a sense that he was maybe too heavily invested in his maleness. He wasn't a person in balance, and that this process that led him to repentance was God chipping away at what was imperfect about who he is, and that passes through his descendants to where the fruit of Cain, and I wrote this in my paper too, is really capitalized in his descendants who are herders of flocks, those who live in tents, those who play music, and those who and the metallurgical thing too. But these are the skills that are used to build the tabernacle. These are all the skills that are used to create the methods of worship. And it's like it's all the skills of King David, who is a messianic figure. He was a herder of sheep and a player of musical instruments, and it says clearly that those are traits that came through the descendants of Cain. Well, obviously Noah's 3 sons aren't the descendants of Cain, so how did those descendants get on the ark? I think it was through Cain's daughters. The daughters of those men are who the wives of Noah and his sons are.
So my assumption is that, like in Taoism, heaven is masculine and earth is feminine.
Right. Yes.
Right. Okay. So Cain, being masculine, has this power to bring life out of the earth, like God did, right? Not exactly like God did, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And he loses this power when he kills Abel.
Yeah, it's like the older shall serve the younger, right? He was kind of supposed to serve and help Abel in a way, right? And instead he killed him. And then in consequence, and if Abel's feminine, then in consequence the feminine's not going to yield her strength to him, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to Ecclesiastes and Hevel Havalim, right? Where were we in Ecclesiastes 3? Were we?
1. We were in verse. Well, we were in
Ecclesiastes.
1, 3.
Actually, let's do 1, 2. So the verse is literally Havel Havalim Amar Kohelet Havel Havalim Hakol Havel. So like, yeah, it's vanity of vanities, but it's like Abel of Abels, said Kohelet. Abel of Abels, everything Abel.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Jacob? Because that's so intriguing to me, but I'm not sure what to make of it yet.
So I think that this world is Abel, right?
Okay, yeah.
The world in which we live is Abel, and it in essence, I guess, suffers from the iniquity of human beings, and eventually, hopefully, when we repent, it will return and be resurrected like Abel. So the people who suffer in this world, right? They are in fact the ones who are hakol, who are everything, right? They are, and in a sense, the feminine. But like, am I making any sense?
Yeah, no, you are to me. Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
So okay, so this is the same story almost as the rich man and Lazarus, right? The rich man, right, enjoys good things on this earth and suffers in hell. Lazarus suffers on earth and is Abraham.
Yeah, in a sense, but the thing is, ultimately, really, like, in Judaism, we do believe some people will be destroyed, right? Mm-hmm. And we do believe that some people will, in fact, suffer for their sins eternally. But my understanding is that the people who, like, the worst thing that can happen to you is to be utterly destroyed. And the next best thing is to have a place in the world to come where you realize your mistakes. And the best thing is that you don't make mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. And so your place in heaven, right, in the world to come, depends on really all of the good things that you do. The more good things that you do, the more of a righteous person you are, the better portion you have in the world to come. But if if you are completely without any saving grace, then you fail to exist at all. You become not, you are annihilated. But if you do have a portion in the world to come, and you did make mistakes, you are eternally going to be punished by those mistakes, because you are eternally going to understand what you are missing because of the mistakes that you made.
I think that this is an aspect where, in the Christian perspective, I wrote this other big essay recently kind of talking about this, and maybe one view that could lead to a kind of a universalism, in that, there is an awareness of pain and suffering in the world to come, but that God can show to us not only the wrong that we did and the pain that it caused, but also how he used it for good, and that ultimately he alone, in the person of Jesus Christ, is the only one who's eternally suffering the pain and the consequence, because he is omniscient and perfect in his memory, always aware of every evil thing that was done and all the pain that was inflicted on others. And therefore, when it says that Jesus will wipe away every tear, I think that it's a realization of not that our minds are going to be wiped of our mistakes, but that we will see that God was able to use them to do something greater and more beautiful.
Okay. Right. And the other thing, so my understanding is that Hebel means breath, right?
Yes.
Okay. So breath, right, is something you feel in your body. It's something that goes in and out and changes all the time.
Well, hold on. No. So it's you're thinking of neshama. That's as in breathing. Hevel breath is like the vapor that you release when you breathe out.
That's fascinating. Okay.
So like late Hebrew Syriac figurative vanity.
So can I interject a question? So what is the breath God breathes into Adam?
That's neshama.
Okay, so that's okay. Is that also sometimes? Is it like ruah, like ruach, or what
ruach
is
is different? That's like a wind and spirit.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So one's breathing in. So that's breathing in almost. The first one in Genesis 2.
Neshama, I guess. Yeah, neshima can be a breathing in. Yeah.
Breathing out or something. Okay.
So yeah, I mean.
Probably not correct. Probably splitting it up too much or something, making it too definite, I guess.
I mean, I'm not, like, you're asking things beyond my competence.
Okay. But neither here nor there.
I don't feel confident in saying that.
But this one specifically is more specifically referencing to the exhale, the breathing out, right?
Well, Hevel is like, so, like, if you put your hand in front of your mouth and you breathe out, right? So, like, that's basically Hevel, I would say.
God, this is why I love Hebrew, because I don't know, there's just something so incredibly poetic about it. And the fact that Ecclesiastes is everything is able. Everything is able. Everything is that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So Ben says, I wish everyone would learn Hebrew. I agree.
That's cool. So what I was trying to get at earlier is, because when we mentioned, and Roman, you kind of brought this idea in of the heavens being masculine, the earth kind of being feminine and all that. And so everything is able. Everything under the sun is able. And so the sun is in the heavens. That's why I didn't know if everything is kind of like Cain over Abel is kind of what we're experiencing. Everything is able. But is that a bad way of maybe?
No, I think that is. So have I showed you guys my sheker and emet thing?
One is lies, one is truth. The lies can't stand up straight. The truth can stand on its own.
Right. Okay. So this world is called Alma de Shikra, and the next world is called Alma de Emet, right? So this world is the world of lies, and the true world, right, is, so sheker is all. So if you look at the Hebrew alphabet, so sheker is so on the bottom. So
this is why ultimately I would say it is okay for Christians to use things like rabbinic sources, in that just having to be cognizant of the fact that anything written before or after the time of Christ may be containing conscious or unconscious bias against Christianity. And if it is intentional deception, that's not going to stand up to scrutiny, and if it's unintentional, that'll be revealed. And the process that Jewish scholarship is still on to refute any claims that Christians make about the presence of God in the Hebrew scriptures, or the presence of Jesus, I should say, rather. Of course, God's all over it, and I would say Christ is as well, but eventually they'll get boxed in to a point where there really won't be much of a leg to stand on anymore. So I'm not worried about it.
The Hebrew alphabet from top right to the bottom left, and so the word sheker, right, which is the word on top, which means lies, is 3 of the last letters, and the word emet, which is the word on top, is the first letter, top right, the middle letter in the middle, and the very last letter. So truth in Hebrew is beginning to end, and it is all solid because all of them would stand up, whereas sheker is all like towards the end of the alphabet, and all of them would fall over because sheker, lies, are fleeting, kind of like Havel, and emet is permanent, kind of like you might say a kinyan, an acquisition. That's funny, huh? I hadn't thought about that. And I guess there's that inversion going on, and like the thing is, like, either way, it's like somebody who's trying to be perfectly logical would tell me, either way, I mean, if the story was the other way, you would also be able to say the same things because you keep on doing these inversions, right? But in my mind, the fact that these inversions exist, like, helps me understand things better. And this was one of the things, actually, so when Jason and Mitchell were talking, like, this is one of the things in Jewish hermeneutics, which is the idea that the Bible has a cursory view that you just, first glance you go through, and then you ask questions, and the answer to the question doesn't nullify your question. What it does is actually give you an understanding that's further down the road and deeper and more solid, and it doesn't negate your previous understanding, but actually makes your understanding richer and fuller.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's been my experience for sure. But yeah, it's still like, and it's still, like you said, it doesn't necessarily negate the question either. Like, it still calls you to deeper understanding at the same time. It's just,
well, that's the important part. So that's what Talmud is. Like, the Talmudic method is you look at your understanding, you ask a question, right? And that question, once it's answered, gives you a deeper understanding that doesn't negate the question. And that's why the Talmud is a discussion and a debate, and you need what's called the shakal and tarya, literally picking up and putting down, right? Of that. I'm just going to say it, intercourse.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
So, I was going to say something about the breath with Hevel, and it was going to be like that, just about impermanence, and like maybe this has something to do with like the breath in your body. But what you said made even more sense, because if it's the breath that came out, then it's like a breath that's already passed away. It's saying this world is like almost already gone.
Well, that's what we mean when we say that God spoke and the world was, right? Baruch Shamar v'ha'olam, the blessed be the one who spoke. And so what does it mean that God spoke, right? He brought something into being similar to how we speak, right? And then it's not permanent because like nothing other than God can be permanent, right? So when God creates, that which he creates is by nature impermanent.
Okay, let me think about this. So that's why we're impermanent, is because we are just words. We are that's it. That's all.
Right, and that's what it means when Isaiah says "Ein od milvado." There is nothing other than him. There literally is nothing other than him. It is only an illusion, a veil that we have, that we exist, that we have a real existence, because God is the only existence that's actual. I am going to end the stream in 10 minutes because over a 3-hour Bible study, and nobody's going to ever pay attention to us ever again.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that was great. I had a good time.
You could say the first hour was almost trying to get the devil out of the technology, though,
Yeah, well, we will probably have to exercise them. I don't know what I'm going to have to do. Roman, if you can be my tech guy, please, and try to figure this out for me.
Did you update Windows?
Yes, that's not the problem. The problem
Okay.
is it may be my driver. We'll talk about this offline.
All right.
Yeah, we'll talk about this offline, but I need somebody who...
Okay. Well, I don't really think there was anything super substantive or interesting that happened after that point, but those were the things I wanted to talk about because for some reason none of these arguments ever get brought up when I'm on Jacob's channel, but he always is talking to everybody else about it. And I've made a lot of videos in these content. Maybe that's why he knows I have some decently cogent explanations for his weak attacks on Christianity. But that's okay. I will just pray for him that he will see the truth eventually. And whatever. I'm not going to say any of the bad tactics that Christians have used in the past in trying to evangelize Jews, I would not endorse. I don't think that's right. I just think that trying to say that the New Testament is ridiculous or the Gospels are ridiculous is not a good move. And, there's not a lot of critical scholars who will uphold the Old Testament as this infallible, imperfect, perfect, amazing document, and then also highly criticize the New Testament. If they criticize the New Testament, they criticize the Old as well. So I just don't think those arguments are wise. And like you said, the truth stands on its own, and anything that's lies will topple over. And I think that's becoming more and more evident in this internet age. Things like Islam are having a harder time keeping up, because when you look at the details of the foundation of that religion, there is a lot of papering over the cracks and a lot of patching up the loopholes and a lot of edicts and decrees about what you can and cannot do in how you approach it and study it. And the same has been true of Christianity in the past. I do think that's a big problem with Catholicism, and it can even happen in Protestant denominations as well. The older Protestant denominations also tend to become too ossified in their creeds and their insistence on that these extra biblical documents were perfect and unquestionable. I think that I guess we could say, in the spirit of Abel, the Word of God is forever, and man's interpretation of it has a time and place, but it's not permanent in the same way. And that's the problem, is that a tradition can never be as permanent as something that actually came from God. And so time is the true test to determine, what stands and what falls. So, anyway, those are my thoughts on that rest of the discussion that I wasn't able to be a part of. And hopefully this is not too boring to watch. Thank you.